So folks, good evening my time, good morning yours, I guess, right? It's a um, pleasure being here. It's at your invitation, um, and I'm honored to entertain you for the next hour. Just a few words, as Donna, you're the host, and with Maurizio, and I will just share a few words about myself, although I don't do so well with a self-introductory note. I'm an organizational design consultant, coach, and trainer. I'm based in the United States, Eastern Seaboard, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island. That's my home area. Um, and I would like to spend some time today with you and introduce you to a very powerful facilitation and discovery technique called system modeling. System modeling that is also based on deep system thinking. And I would like to make this session as informal as it gets, which means, I do have some light slides and I'm going to have a mirror board fired up and a few maybe web pages, but this isn't, it's as unstructured as it could get. So interrupt me, ask me questions, whatever. And I will be using some of the materials. I did not create any specific materials for this session just because they are ready to go for me as a part of my day-to-day routine when I consult and coach for clients or teach organizational design system called large scale Scrum. So it will be right out of the box, essentially. We'll discuss on tangents if needed, but it's going to be right out of the content that I typically use. Okay.
Good.
Anything you would like to say or ask before we get started? Okay, let me fast forward to the slide that is actually, well, I went a little too fast, that talks about system thinking. So I'm going to focus specifically on system thinking today, folks. Again, I want to demystify it for you. This isn't some, it's not a mysterious uh, approach. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a magical it's not a magic wand. It's not something that's out of this world. It's not extraterrestrial. It's very, very earthy, very ours. Okay? It's the way for us as humans to be able to embrace and absorb an entire system, and we need to discuss what we mean by a system and think about the whole as opposed to just a tiny bit. One of the analogies I would like to use here is is our, well, let's start with where we live. So I live in the United States. This is the North American continent. You live in Japan. So for me, let's just say the United States is the system. It's a national system. For you, it's Japan. We are all a part of um, a much bigger system called Earth. So we live on Earth. So it depends how we draw our boundaries. If we draw our boundaries just around our country, our respective countries, then what we can talk about and possibly influence and control stays within those boundaries. But if we expand our boundaries, we may potentially talk about other things like other continents, other countries, other oceans and seas and whatever. So we can take it even higher. We can say let's expand our boundaries of our system and go to the solar system. Then we're going to have to talk about all the planets, including the sun. We're going to expand it even further and talk about a galaxy, and we can expand it as far as going to the entire universe. So depending on how we draw our boundaries, we're going to define our system. And obviously, the wider we get, the wider we go, the more complexities we're going to encounter during runtime when objects move around. Like imagine the galaxy, like how many things are moving around, how many planets and asteroids and comets. Okay. Now let me ask you this question. Maybe you can help me. what do you think? How do you define the difference between causation and correlation? This is, I don't want to get it too linguistic on this. Maybe a bit of an, language, English thing, but I think you're fluent enough to know the difference. Like, what do you think? Causation versus correlation. Anyone? Nano? Igor, David, Donna? Anyone? No?
I'll try. Causation is cause and effect, and correlation is how things relate to one another. I don't know.
So you are like 75% right. So, well, at least 50 for sure. Causation, cause and effect. Something happens with an object A or with a system variable A, and somehow it impacts what happens on B. Like something happens with on the moon will definitely impact what happens on Earth. In fact, with tides, with currents, that's exactly what happens, right? When a moon spins around Earth, we have tides. So causation, one thing causes another. Sun is shining very brightly, and we have a bunch of things going on here on Earth. Grass grows, grass sometimes gets burned. We get, God knows, God forbid, and it happens anywhere. Wildfires in California because of that, because of drought. Rain, if it rains, a lot of precipitate, lots of water, vegetation grows. So that's cause and effect. In fact, there could be some systemic loops, right? In the system, A leads to B, B leads to C, and then something happens to C and it impacts A again. Correlation is something else. It is actually not as interesting to us because it just means that two things correlate, almost happen in sync, but there is no cause and effect relationship. For example, sun may not be shining, and I will be teaching. Well, this isn't really not teaching. We will be running this session. Or it could be shining very brightly, and I will be still doing this. So it's irrespectively to what's happening with the weather, we're going to be meeting here together and having a conversation. So these two things happen completely ad hoc, independently. Or the stock market opens up in Tokyo, and in the United States we have we have a strike. People go on strike. People that do some government work go on strike. So completely independent activities. So we don't really care about a correlation as much because it doesn't really give us much. But causation is interesting because we can actually change the system by doing certain things to certain parts of the system. We can change the whole. Let me give you some examples. Oh, by the way, before I give you some examples, I would like to make some basic terminology introduction. So there are some cause and effect relationships, or we call them causal links, that are definitional, and others that are just probabilistic. Now, could be highly or not so highly probable. Let me give you an example. And we all are familiar with this terminology, right? We're all agilists, or people that understand the word agile in some way, shape, or form. So how about this? Size of a story point. I use a story point. Right? If this size is going up, so one story point means a lot, means this much, then the overall velocity is going to drop. O stands for an opposite. So the more value, the more weight we give to a story point, the lower our velocity. Why? Consider this as a buying currency. The buying currency of a story point is high, and therefore the sum of all of the story points is going to be low. This is by definition. And the opposite is true too. If we have a story point that is very small, tiny, like almost you write a line of code and you call it a story point, and then your overall velocity is going to be astronomical, because you can say, well, I wrote 50 lines of code, and each line is one story point, so I have produced 50 story points worth of velocity. It's complete nonsense, but it may be perceived as such. Now, if we have velocity, so velocity is called a system variable, and so is the size of a story point. As one system variable changes its direction, high or low, the other system variable will also change its direction. It can go in the same direction or it can go in the opposite direction. Here's another example of opposite direction. O stands for an opposite. When velocity is high, let me use another example. When velocity is low, we just think, oh, our velocity is not high enough. Our managers can come in and say, you know what, please go faster. You need to produce a high velocity. They don't understand what the heck velocity means, but they say more, more, more. They don't think there is enough story points. So high velocity will essentially make them cool off and say, oh, wow, great, you produced 90 story points in the sprint. Kudos to you. Let's pat each other in the back. This double pipe stands for a delayed result, delayed causation. It doesn't happen right away, but when the manager sees that from sprint to sprint, your velocity is low, they're going to start putting pressure on it. Now, let me ask you a question and be honest with me and with yourself. What happens when your manager tells you to go faster, we need high velocity? What happens then? You're smiling. You know the magic trick. You know what you're going to do, right? You're going to inflate your numbers. You're going to bullshit, forgive my French. So the number of quick fix and game inactions is going to go up. The pressure to go faster will almost immediately mean we're going to BS and we are going to inflate numbers and we're creating an illusion that we're going fast. Okay? So we're going to take some actions here to redefine our story point smaller. We're not dumb. No longer is this a 1 story point. This is a 5 story points. God knows. So we have this organizational systemic dysfunction here. So action to redefine story points smaller is going to have an opposite effect on the size of a story point. Now you change the system because of some pressure in the system. It's managerial behavior. It's just one of the examples. Now, another way to fix the problem of low velocity is what? You can redefine your story points, just do silly math, cook numbers as we call them in English, or you can think, we don't have enough people. Gee, we need to have more people. And we immediately jump into this conclusion, let's hire more people. And because we don't think hard and because we're always on a fixed budget, we're going to hire developers at a cheap rate. So cheap developers. So what do we know about cheap developers? Well, let's explore this. If we hire more cheap developers, then overall percentage of cheap developers is going to grow. As a rule of thumb, the number of cheap developers is going to, if it increases, the percentage of weak developers is going to also increase. This is an example of a probabilistic link. It's not by definition, but it's highly probable. You can say, well, if we go to a different country that has a, just weaker economy, we can get great quality people for less money. Maybe truly so, but there is a limit to that. Even there, the best developers are usually, acquired by other companies for a higher rate because even there is, they have their own market. So usually cheap means weak. And therefore, if you have percentage of weak developers increasing in the system, with some delay, code quality is going to drop. So this is a delayed sign. This is an O, stands for an opposite. So code quality drops. And this has a strong influence on the number of features delivered in the sprint. Because if you have buggy code, guess what? You're not delivering those features. No matter what your zero velocity gadget says, you're not delivering any features. Okay? By the way, the thicker the line usually means the more highly pronounced. It means your causation is stronger. It's an arbitrary decision, whether you want to make it very thick or very thin. And there are sometimes secondary causations, like percentage of cheap developers. If it's increased, it will also directly increase potentially the number of features delivered in the sprint, but those could be mostly buggy features. Now, number of features delivered in the sprint has its own outcome and causation, such as potentially increased velocity, potentially the number of solutions, and potentially percentage of waste. These links are probabilistic. Why? You can say why? Because just because you delivered too many features does not mean you have provided too many business solutions. You might have gold-plated, or you might have created stuff that nobody really cares. So just the volume of work does not automatically translate into impact of work. Worse yet, if you're not delivering features that are fully integrated, if you deliver chunks of features, aka components, then your solutions are certainly going to be low. And with that, you're going to have lots of waste produced, because the more coordination and dependency management you need to do, the more organizational waste you're going to produce. So this is just an example of how systems may potentially work. So let me pause for a minute and see if you have any questions about annotations, like what these errors mean, or about some of these abbreviations like annotations. O stands for an opposite. How is it so far? Is it clear? Is it not so clear?
Clear?
Thank you. Theory, Taka, SJ, you guys, or gals, I'm not sure who's behind the scene. You guys and gals are comfortable with this, or do you have any comments?
Yes, this is great.
Okay, cool. Do stop me if you have any questions. I would like to move on and show you another example. In fact, I'm going to show you just a couple examples. You know, it's different areas of ecosystemic model of a very large organization. How about that? So I'm going to use my mirror board, and please don't get scared, because the system model that's on it is huge, because I use it for in training in class, and like each cluster here is a separate exercise. But I'll take you just to a few.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, this is it's not a laughing matter, and I'm not trying to impress you, to be frank. It's just to show you that as we run, you know, training, when we do various exercises, we then realize that not a single exercise, not a single piece of the system is autonomous on its own. It's a part of a bigger system. And we start, so every exercise, it's within the exercise itself. There are variables, there are instructions how to work. But then we say, oh, well, we're at the juncture where we can start working across these exercises, because now it becomes a bigger picture. Okay, so here's an example. By the way, these colors, let's just assume they mean nothing. I use them in a very biased way. Especially when I explain this to people, for simplicity, to make it simple on people, as I say usually, if we're consistent in our understanding what's good and what's bad, and what we wish to see more of and less of, let's paint in red stuff that we want to decrease in the system because we don't like it, and let's paint in green or teal stuff that we actually do like and wish to increase in the system. So that's just a side note. Pretend these are all colorless. So let's see what happens. Let's start with a goal here. We can start modeling the system pretty much with anything, with a goal, with a problem, just with an aspiration to have a discussion and do like a bunch of ideas dump on a canvas, and then see if we can map them together. I like starting simple, so let's start simple. What happens if my boss has the following goal? I want to see high feature velocity. Many bosses said, many managers say that we are not fast enough. We should increase our productivity from 71% to 98%. Amazing. Great. Let's see what happens. So you exert more pressure on your developers. You put pressure and try actions to increase feature velocity. I, in my head, say immediately, don't do that. It's a bad idea. So I color coded in red. Again, it could be biased and anchored to my views, but for the sake of this conversation and for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to keep it red for now. Now, if I increase pressure on developers, if I'm the boss, over time, most likely I'll see presumably higher feature velocity. Now, whether it's a real velocity going up because we did some amazing things, or it's a fake velocity because we cooked the numbers, I don't know. But my feature velocity goes up. And then, because I am developing faster, like when you drive on a speedy highway, you probably remember the more and more bumps, boom, 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 speed bumps. You start encountering those quicker. And therefore, the number of bugs increases. So as you go fast, the number of bugs increases. This is called, folks, a stabilizing loop. As the number of bugs goes up, O stands for an opposite, right? Inevitably, your feature velocity is going to drop. So you gotta go faster and it drops. And as it drops, you may want to start going faster again. So this is the pressure. That's what it leads to. Now, also, if there is so we actually looked at this in the previous slide, but here it's, I'm taking this a little wider. If the pressure is high, the number of low-skilled developers is also high. It's going to increase, and O stands for an opposite, and the feature velocity is going to drop. Now, let me shift this conversation slightly to another goal, and this is of someone else who's a developer. And naturally, developers want to get paid. Anyone wants to get paid fairly for the job that they do. So whereas I'm the boss and I say feature velocity faster, 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 the developer says, I want more money, more money, more money. And if our organization is structured in such a way that we pay high rewards, we have incentives, bonuses for certain behaviors, such as high feature velocity or high degree of output, I will be very much influenced to do whatever I can to produce a high velocity. And because of that, I'm going to be pressured to game the numbers, and I'm going to be pressured to take actions to increase my velocity. So this value of reward has causation on both of these. Now, if I game the numbers too much, the degree of measurement dysfunction, ability to actually measure something in the system, is gonna also increase. Remember, the word dysfunction here is the key here, so I'm gonna bold it. Okay, we're talking about dysfunction. If we game numbers, we're gonna create a very dysfunctional condition, and therefore our overall ability to guide and improve the system is gonna drop. So this is, if this variable goes up, this variable over time is gonna decrease. Okay. Let me pause and ask you questions. What do you think? What other thoughts that come to your head? And I'll give an extension of this model just in a second. So let me get it to the right scale. Okay, any thoughts? Donna, please.
It's not about the topic itself, but for example, if we're gonna start, maybe this is a generic question. If we're gonna start with, for example, doing modeling to have a conversation, and then we start with a problem, one of the things I always think about is how do you come up with the variables, or how do you set boundaries? Because yes, this can go very, very wide.
Yeah.
Or very, very deep in a particular thing. So you don't need to answer it now, but it's always been on my head, and it's kind of hard.
Sure.
Like, hey, let's model how.
So I'm actually going to answer your question in two ways. So, and I appreciate you asking. So the reason why we split, at least I do, in my training, these the whole model into, excuse me, into different exercises because I do not want to overwhelm people all at once with a huge ecosystem that they are up against. So each exercise essentially is a temporary boundary of the system just for the sake of that exercise. Like right now, we're exploring set goals and system gaming. With my next exercise, I would like to explore HR norms and policies. So you are this, here I'm going to talk about budgeting and finance. Here I'm going to talk about internal contracts, analysis and design, technical excellence, product backlog, undone department, and on and on and on and on and on. So you have those different ways to circumvent and create an artificial boundary to a system so you don't get, you don't go nuts. And as you get comfortable, if you expand within the system that you have defined and you feel that you're comfortable to expand further, go ahead and do that. Now, that's the first question, Don. And the second question, how do you define these variables? Like anything can be turned to a variable. One thing that's important, simple but important, is how you frame it. Notice that every variable is framed, is phrased in such a way that it has a neutral word that is at the beginning. Urgency, dependency, likelihood, rigidity, ability, quality, number, pressure. Why? Because you can take any one of these words and say high or low. If you explicitly say high or low and write it in the variable, it kind of hard codes your causation. So if you say high rigidity, then you already defined your rigidity. High. You want to leave it flexible. You want it to be a variable. You want it to be like a flexor or a gauge that you can turn up or down, because you want to see what happens with the rest of the system as you play with the gauge. Dependency, is it high or is it low? Is it medium? How do you tweak it? Okay, so take anything you wish. Degree of understanding, likelihood of or probability of happening, and keep it neutral. Make sure it's adjustable. So each variable should be adjustable. It's just better. It will make your system much more dynamic as opposed to hard-coded, rigid. Any other questions, folks? Igor, please.
Yeah, let me try. I'm not really understanding my question myself, but I will try. So when you start modeling the system, you said you start with the goal, or it's one of the approaches.
One of the ways, not always the case, but sure.
Yeah. Usually it's kind of easy to see correlation or not correlation, causation, something. So it helps you to draw the first variable, but how to draw the second variable? Like, do you have question that you ask yourself, or is there any approach to find this second?
Very good question. Yeah. So in my experience, so it's always it's a slow start. You can have your mind, your head full of ideas and thoughts of various, types of variables that may exist in the system, and you don't know yet how they are all related. So you can do it you can approach this by just doing what's called a brain dump. Write a bunch of stuff on a canvas, on a bunch of sticky notes before you forget. And also, hopefully you can, as you do it, you write them in the way I just described. This is a way, if you're like about to explode from the amount of information that's in your head, do that. If not, failing that, you can start sequentially, and you start with a goal, like you said, or it doesn't have to be a goal. It could be any other condition, or it could be any other variable. And you start slow by saying, well, what happens if we have desire to be an individual outperformer. And by the way, I'm going to give you it's a cheat. I'm cheating. If there's a value to generate a reward or collect a reward, if value of your reward is high, like my bonus is not just 5% of my salary, my bonus is 35% of my salary. Guess what? My desire to be an individual outperformer is astronomically high. I want to be better than every one of you, any one of you. So, Igor, to your question, let's just say you start with this thing alone. And then you ask yourself a question. What happens? And it may take you a while to think what happens next. So then you may think, well, what happens to a peer-to-peer support? What happens to you supporting me, Igor, if you know that you and I are in a competitive game? We're competing against the same bonus pool. Our boss, Donna, said, folks, you are at the same pecking order, you're the same level organizationally, and we have only one of you can get promoted, and only one of you can get, or there's some sort of like you competing with each other because there's so much money in the system. So what's going to happen to your support to me, and of course my support to you, if we are trying to outperform each other? Are we going to support each other? Probably not so much. So that's just first thing that may come to mind, Igor. You may also think about how about HR emphasis on individual performance appraisals called IPAs. Do they have any cause and effect? I'm going to argue that yes. If your HR keeps saying individual performance, individual perks and bonuses, blah, 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 you need to, achieve a certain degree of blah, blah achievement, guess what? We're going to be fighting for that bonus. We're going to be trying to outperform each other. If HR does that, what's going to happen to internal competition and rivalry? Me versus you. Or me versus Taka. We're going to be trying to do harakiri to each other. Right? We're going to be trying to cut each other's throat. Fighting for the bonus. So competition and rivalry and peer-to-peer support. Are they friends? Not really. Well, if there was high peer-to-peer support, and of course there will be team synergy and stability. But internal competition and rivalry is going to kill it. So this is high, this is low, this is low, this is high. This is high, this is high. Igor, am I helping you with your question? Am I answering it at least to some extent?
Yeah, I think so. So far, what I got is like you start to explore. One of the things is like, what if something happens and you go this road? And
what? Right, absolutely true. And one trick: as much as you think you might be smart, and as much as I may think I could be smart, it's the two of us together. We're just that much smarter. It is not a linear; it's a super linear increase of in us being smart, and this is what it means to work together in the system. So this is a typical system modeling exercise when we do it together. It's to recommend a number of people like 5 to 6, maybe 4 to 6 people, no more than 6, because now it becomes too noisy. And we come together and we model the system. It is much easier when you have 6 brains, 5 brains, or 4 brains, 3 brains working together. Because when you do this on your own, I mean, it helps a lot to to crystallize your thoughts, but you will be definitely developing what's called cognitive bias, because you can build a system only based on what your own understanding is. And I'll admit, you can say, well, you can accuse me of doing this and saying, Gene, these are your ideas, right? So, and therefore, it's very biased to your views. Maybe you're right in a way, but I've done, if not hundreds, then many dozens of iterations with people, with students, with colleagues. So this is not just my own production. And you can start here and you can expand, and it's going to be Very specific to your case, very specific to your organization. Although there's some common patterns, In fact, there are many of them. Things could vary. For example, if your organization puts no emphasis on individual performance appraisals in a way that they are linked to bonuses and perks, this whole part of the system becomes trivial. It still exists, but it's not as impactful. You see, emphasis on a team performance, if it is high, then it's going to have an opposite effect on the internal competition and that rivalry. Why? Because we are emphasizing the importance of a team performance, not individual. I'm going to zoom out a little more and show you more of that. Career path, promotion, compensation, supportive of functional skill set that's expected. It's going to have a very strong, and this line goes God knows where. It's going to have very positive causation on managers' hands-on capability and functional expertise. Why? Because if we promote that good managers are good doers, then managers would not be losing their skills in order to become managers. Think of many of managers that you may know that after 3 to 4 years of doing management, they forget how to do work. All they know is how to tell others how to do work, theoretically, but cannot really practically show more much. So motivation, so here's another one. Motivation to learn from each other and teach each other complementary skills. If this variable goes up, willingness to learn from each other complementary skills also goes up. And then likelihood that the team becomes autonomous, self-sustainable, and cross-functional also goes up. And then the team synergy goes up. So this is just on norms and policies of HR. But this thing goes, plugs in elsewhere. And we can go on and on and on. You tell me, like, almost, because this exercise, this group of exercises is so inclusive, almost throw anything at me and I will probably find somewhere in the system where we talk about it. But it's pretty big. To your question, where to draw the boundaries? This is here the boundaries are probably organizational walls. With some exposure to the market, maybe. It's beyond a single team. It's beyond a single department.
Gene, just out of curiosity, because I see it there, can you just browse over the Scrum Master role in the Agile Theater? Just
Sure, would love to. So let me actually, I'm going to give you this a quick example here. Here's a belief. We can start with a belief, not a goal, a belief, or just almost anything. It comes from the CIO. A CIO went to the Silicon Valley, and she visited a few companies where, they do some amazing product development things. And she was like, damn it, what do you guys do? How do you do this? And someone said, well, we use Scrum, and all these people that are helping with Scrum development, these are Scrum Masters. These are amazing people. Are they like project managers? No, they're not project managers. They're Scrum Masters. So she gets all excited, and she comes back to the the large bank that she manages. She's the CIO, and she says, I need to do the same thing here at the bank. And she organizes a town hall. She invites everyone and their mother, and she says, you know what? We need to have more Scrum Masters. We need to have lots of Scrum Masters, because I went down there to the Silicon Valley and I was blown off my feet. I was amazed with how much, value these people deliver. My question to you, what happens next? She spoke at the town hall. Now, a couple of things may happen. So as a quick fix, QF stands for a quick fix. We're going to end up with an Agile Theater, which is a broad and shallow adoption, making the system appearing like we're gaming. What does it mean? It means that we are going to create a bunch of Scrum Masters just because the CIO spoke. And there's another system variable. And you actually can explain to me, well, you at least you correct me if I'm wrong. The word Gemba in Japanese means Gienshu Gimbutsu, right? Am I pronouncing this right? Not so much, right? It's where action takes place. But building internal agile power towers that are away from Gemba is going to also give rise to the risk to the agile theater. So if she says that, the immediate reaction would be, oh, let's just turn our PMO or Center of Excellence into the Scrum Master Forum, and every ex project manager now, let's relabel this person into a Scrum Master. Why? Well, because we are all under pressure. The CIO said that. So that's a quick fix, and this is not so good, and that's why I color-coded in red. Now, if you do this, it's going to have an opposite effect, causation, on chances of seeing real, long-lasting organizational improvements. Okay? But at the same time, there's some goodness may happen from her speaking up like this. What would be this goodness, for example? Just because she's the boss and she's high up there when she said that, and it cascades down through your organizational channels, you may see a supportive environment for creating Scrum Master communities. This is as a potential outcome of this. Now, I'm a big fan, I'm a big proponent of communities, not of agile power towers, where you just relabel existing people into, people that are now supposedly in demand. I'm a big proponent and a big fan of creating horizontal structures that do not have authority per se and do not have an organizational pecking order. They're just for functional learning. So a supportive environment for a Scrum Master community could be another potential outcome of her speaking loudly at a town hall. And if you have this environment flourishing, then the likelihood that experienced self-driven Scrum Masters will have freedom and safety is also going to go up. So there's an expression in English, you have to take good with the bad. So when she does it, when she speaks at a town hall, various things can come out of this. Some fast, quick fixes that are not so good, but also some goodness. And we just don't know what is going to prevail because the system is very, very, very complex. Like, for example, a supportive environment for creating a Scrum Master community, it's going to put a very strong constraint. C stands for constraint on building agile power tower of those nonsense roles. So I always recommend create a community. Create a community. Why? Because you're going to start teaching and educating people in ways that can effectively challenge these power towers of nonsense. These communities may not have as much organizational jurisdiction, but this is a great antidote. Okay? These power towers can increase the amount of silos and redundancy and overhead. It's ironic how costly these things are. We're saying we're going to make things more lean and more adaptive and more flat, but we reproduce same exact complexities by erecting these agile power towers. In fact, I have, cartoons and graphics that describe it, but I'll probably show you at some later time. So this is just one example how, about the Scrum Master role. And the Agile Theater, by the way, this is probably a bigger conversation altogether, right? The number of so-called managers looking for ways to stay busy. If this number goes up, then reliance on agile project management tools with many layers is also going to go up. And that's going to lead to dependency on heavily, complex waterfall-like frameworks such as SAFe. So it's all related. If you're putting a lot of degree and emphasis on metrics and reporting, this is also going to play in. So these things all come together. To what extent? It's for you to decide, depending on your system, depending on your company. And you can turn this high or low. Like, for example, you can decrease your emphasis on metrics and reporting. And then you will start seeing that, hey, well, maybe these tools are not as important. Or you can maybe decrease the number of people looking for ways to stay busy, the same area of people that are promoting these management tools. Then you will say, wow, we don't have these extra people. We don't have this extra overhead of tooling, and we're just doing just fine. So we must be doing something right. So let me pause. We have only what? Maybe 10 minutes left, 9 minutes left. Any questions, any thoughts? Please.
So when you do the model, right, and then you have the conversation, you have this, what if we decrease or increase or tweak this particular variable.
Mhm.
Can you give an example of, from a model, this group decide like we should try this experiment, or we should try this action, because 4 to 6 people for, let's say, a systemic level. I mean, you can do it in a team level for a retro maybe, but if we're talking about like systemic level problems where it spans across departments, like, will this be groups of 4 to 6 people? I'm going like way too many questions, but
Well,
you
I mean, it's a nested question for sure, but Donna, these are all good questions. So first of all, maybe I heard you incorrectly, but I thought you asked, who is this good for? Like, which
like
channel?
these 4 to 6, because if they're modeling for an entire system, right? For, let's say, a wider
Yeah.
system that spans across departments, would it be groups of 4 to 6 people from different departments? Would it be the leadership level
So first of all, you need to have people with aspiration and some great facilitation skills.
right?
You can practice on your own before you have your prime time. You can do it on your own. You can get comfortable. Then you can invite a few colleagues or trusted colleagues or friends. Expand your ability to do it to others. Do it with a few team members. Apply it at a retrospective. What should I show you? Maybe I should show you, what do I have this graphic? I have this graphic somewhere here. And so you want to build yourself up to the level of comfort where you can actually take this conversation to an executive manager, to someone who is influential enough, who can see something that they no longer can unsee. Oh, shoot, you're showing me something. And they'll probably get very frustrated because you're throwing this into their face. It's like a mirror that shows, oh my God, I have a big and ugly nose. You didn't say it to them, but you gave them the mirror. So think of this as a way to reflect, make them see that what they no longer can undo. This is just an example of doing a system model as a part of the overall retrospective in large scale Scrum, or just a team level retrospective. It's a great way to facilitate a discussion and make people think about the whys. Why are certain things happening? Why are we observing certain problems? So, or what are some of the potential, potential improvements we could make? So you can use the system model, and system thinking and system model and come hand, as a horse and carriage. You can use it at a team level when you're doing a team retrospective. You can use it at an overall retrospective, like here it's shown with a bunch of senior managers to help them expand on the whole system. You can do it pretty much anywhere. If you really want to, to tackle a very senior executive with this, of course, you want to keep things simple and start with things that really, really matter. And I like this shock therapy. Show them a few cause and effect relationships that are very, very, very awakening. Stuff that really matters to them, because they're also humans and they have certain things where their interest lies, their selfish interests. So maybe you want to talk about funding, about, ROI, about your company's success. You can co-create with them, which is the best. But if you feel they will not give you that much time, create a very simple system model, 2 or 3 variables, with a few very strong cause and effect relationships, like thick arrows, and give it to them and say, Mr. Mr. Tokuyori Kashimoto, please take a look. You are facing this organizational systemic problem. Do you agree or disagree? And Mr. Hashimoto is going to say, I disagree. And that's your success. Because if he says, I disagree, it means he is willing to engage in the conversation. So a negative answer is a perfectly good answer. You can start in at the, maybe you can give him a couple of beers and he will be comfortable enough to actually co-create from the start. But if he is very time limited, give him a little teaser and see where it takes him. Because if you just give him a slide, a PowerPoint slide with the blah, blah, blahs, your observations, he's going to say, well, what are your solutions to this? If you give him a system model, there's a high chance he's, very simple one. He will ask you this and you can start engaging him in a conversation. So it's not reserved just for low level or high level. You can actually apply it anywhere. But before you do, of course, you want to practice. And you need to learn the system. That's why in large scale Scrum, we make such a huge emphasis on system dynamics and seeing the whole. Because stuff that we teach in large scale Scrum, if you think about it, it's actually rather very basic if you read less rules. It's the why those rules are in place. This is what becomes important. And in order to understand the whys and why, you need to model the system.
Thank you. Maybe somebody else has questions. I've been asking questions so much, but if somebody else has before we... Yes, David.
David, please.
Yeah, this is maybe to add on to what Donna asked and also what you explained. I feel that when you create this systems modeling, it's based on people's experiences, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking that if you share this with other people like management, do you need to look into like how can you present these as facts? Should you do some data research behind it, show some numbers? For example, if you say like, hey, we have a number of very low experience developers, how do we actually show that?
Well, so good question. So this is not driven by proof with data. It's driven by common sense and our shared experience. So if someone says, no, I do not think that an internal competition and rivalry is going to decrease peer-to-peer support, that's what they think. And if you and them engage in this dialogue, you are certainly in a disagreement. Now, they can ask you, prove it to me. And then you can turn around and say, well, look, you've been talking about individual performance appraisals, and these people are not working together. They're working away from each other. You are certainly bound to your system and to your personal experiences. That's why doing this like this, where's my page doesn't load fast. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get to this graphic, to the actual, the actual photograph. When you do it like this, you're decreasing your risks of cognitive bias, whereas only one person is going to anchor, his or her reader or follower to their own thoughts. Let these two people be in disagreement, in productive, in constructive disagreement, and have a constructive dialogue, constructive argument about what's right and what's wrong, what's high and what's low. They could be coming from different companies and different departments where these variables have different weight. But you want to have the conversation. The most important thing is not the diagram. It's to have a conversation. It helps you have a conversation. It does not substitute for it. Once you come to the lowest common denominator, David, you can say, you know what, we can, take a snippet of it and then we're going to file it and we're going to toss it away. Now we have a shared understanding.
Thank you.
So that's about it, folks. Thank you for joining. I know I'm out of time, and I think you need to carry on with your work day, and I need to, have some hot tea before bedtime, and maybe I need to get some energy back before tomorrow. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you're interested in anything like an internal to your organization workshop, or maybe something as comprehensive as a large scale Scrum course, you can always you always know where to find me. Basically, I'm pretty transparent. Hook me up, hook up with me on LinkedIn, or just email me directly. Or if you just want to be if you want to have free access to free stuff, because I have plenty of it on my website, do not hesitate to reach out. I'm good one way or the other. There are no strings attached. Sounds
Gene,
good?
thank you so much for spending time with us. I know it's late, so get your tea, have a good rest, and thank you so much again. And we'll reach out if we have, if there's any other further engagements for sure. Thank
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
you.